I got involved with music because of my passion for music, and then I moved to Berlin when I was 19 from in the country, and dived into the Berlin music scene back in the days. And then I got an offer because I studied journalism, politics and history, and for the journalism course we had to get a radio feature, practice how to do that, and find interview partners. And so we did this with the founders of Interfish Records it was earlier than 88, I think. Can't remember exactly. 88, yeah. And so I met Dimitri, Hegemann, and his partner back in the days, and they did run Interfish. They just started Interfish Record as a record company. And then we met each other. After this interview, we met each other again in a bar, and then they asked me to be their secretary. So this is how I started to get into music professionally, working for a label. And we all started at the same time and learned together how to run a label. I mean, you have to see there was Germany divided, and then there was Berlin as an island of western part as well, and then the east side, of course, of Berlin, in the middle of the East German, the Soviet Union zone, the East German zone. So you had to go to Berlin through transit. Yeah, so you drove through Eastern Germany and you couldn't leave the highway. And Berlin was really an island in different ways. The scene, the people, the whole feeling, because it was, surrounded by a wall, but it had a special freedom also in thinking. Because a lot of people moved to Berlin because also back in the days, there was 24 hours opening for clubs. There was no curfew in bars and clubs, which is very special still in Germany, and Berlin had this special status. So a lot of people came to study here like I did, but I wanted to move to Berlin, so I chose my university because it was in Berlin, and live here. And of course, with this special status, you also had a very special subculture scene, always, happening, and in West and in East Berlin. East Berliners, of course, had it different because there was a political situation as well. If they were punk rock people, thought differently, that was dangerous for them, so they had to be incognito. But there were people, and West Berlin, of course, you had the freedom to look like you want, to be how you are, and this is what I, experienced when I was young. The story for me is there was Atonal Festival, which is now on again, but back in the days it was more underground guitar experimental music festival, and then electronic music started, and then that was also curated by Dimitri Hegemann and his partners. I was the secretary for the label, and then when the electronic music started to change, there was not exactly techno yet, but also, industrial bands, crossover bands with emceeing, those kind of bands set up, but with electronic parts and synthesizers and everything. So the first one Atonal, that was in '89, was dedicated to those kind of new movement and generation and band development. And so there was the change coming with the change of the music. And it's a little bit at the same time. Of course, there were international bands coming, but also in Berlin, the electronic scene started. People start to produce music with electronic gear. And in Detroit, the same, but that came from Kraftwerk, going over to Detroit, influenced Detroit. There, electronic music, techno started, and then it came back to Germany from Detroit, but in a different way, of course, in the Detroit techno style way. And in Berlin at the same time, electronic music grew and grew. It was a small scene in the beginning, of course, but it went bigger and bigger. And so there were some similarities in the development in Detroit and Berlin. And so when Tresor, for example, happened, that was not a big deal. It did match right away. That artists from Detroit came over to play Tresor Club. Tresor Club was the first club to have techno. Sometimes was 2K as well. The harder techno was 2K. And then this is where the place where everybody met. The Berlin people, the electronic people, and then the American, and then of course the international ones as well. One important thing is also historical, of course, because then the wall came down and the atmosphere in Berlin was really, wow, everything is open, freedom for the people from the East. Us from the West had a completely new part of the city we didn't know. And there was a very, very, very special atmosphere. And again, it's a little bit by accident that electronic music was already there. But then on the dance floors, it happened that, I mean, from our point of view, my point of view, in the hindsight, the unification started there because people met on the dance floor, no matter where they came from, no matter what nationality, no matter what background, we all met to experience this interesting new electronic music at the same time. The label I was working for as a secretary was Interfish. So there, and the signings were Club DVA from Sheffield, and also very young electronic Berlin artists. And the label was the distribution, and the structure was already there. Then the wall came down. Then Tresor found the location, and then the Tresor started. And then there was, of course, also the possibility for having artists on the label. And I was there already professionally, but mainly label side. And then X102 was the first release. That was Underground Resistance. And they were looking for a licensed partner in Europe. And then we said, okay, we have a label, it's there, we can do it. But as the sound was now very techno, very electronic, also, of course, the label changed the name into Tresor Records. That was something that was organic to happen. So the club was there, then the label was there, and then it all started. The start, like I said, with the first artist from Detroit was through Underground Resistance with the X101 release, but then it also went on with the X102 and X103. And at the same time, more artists from Detroit were writing us and asking if we would also be interested in releasing their releases and their music. So it was snowball. So then Eddie Flash and Folks, Blake Baxter, Juan Atkins came on. And then also we did some collaborations when they came over to meet also Berlin musicians like Thomas Fehlmann, Morris von Oswald, and then the Jazz is the Teacher release came up with Juan Atkins, Eddie Flash and Folks with Thomas Fehlmann. So we did the access, not just bringing them here and they played and getting their music, but also started to, bring people together, good musicians together, and then it went on and on and on. And important was Hardwax, the store Hardwax. They imported the records, they had the records, And they also gave advice on upcoming next artist DJs that should play in Berlin. So Mark Ernestus from Hardwax also played an important role for who came over, who we could bring over. And so that's how it happened. And then people started to buy records at Hardwax first, which were very much likely, mostly DJs first. But then also, of course, you know how that is. Music lovers, people that are interested in what's new. And then the whole movement just, took step by step and started from there. I think a lot. I mean, it's of course, I was involved with Tresor Records and Tresor Club. It was really important that this was happening. And we were the first club or label that had a label or club together from the beginning, which, other clubs later started also to do own labels, but that was first. But then, of course, there were other clubs coming then, eWork, WMF, also, for a certain time, because there were all these options with new locations. In the East, there was a lot of unexplored buildings. So we had also a lot of illegal clubs being there for a while later on Bunker, Walfish, and then also people who were active already in the eastern part started, of course, to do parties. And that all went together. So it was affected, every day. If you dive into electronic music, you're a techno lover or music lover, then of course you were affected because you went to get the records. You went to check the other club at the weekend. So it started in a smaller scene, but is pretty much what was happening then now over all those years worldwide. Because of course it was not only in Berlin, there was also Frankfurt, there was also UK, there was also, Italy. And it happened there as well, maybe a different level or how we would say it, a little bit different genres of music. But I was talking to Jeff Mills recently about, how it all goes or came through. And there's also, of course, Chicago with the house scene. And then influenced by Italo disco, coming back, getting harder. Here was techno. New York was happening as well. I went to New Music Seminar in 1991 and representing Tresor. And there was underground resistance ready to conquer the world. There was Sonic Groove record store with Adam X, very young. Sorry, I need to drink something. Also ready for everything. And a lot more people there. And we all met at this point at the New Music Seminar in New York. Later on, there were other fairs, but that was an important one beginning of the 90s. I don't know, who shall I name now? Because everybody in a way that was possible, because people always forget also sometimes there was no email. There was no online flight booking. You had to, get a ticket for an artist and send it to him by post if you bought it here. People have to be aware that all the connections was, not like this, because now we have digital world. And so people came over to stay and a little bit longer. You didn't fly in and out from America. You stayed 1 week and then collaborations were possible. I mentioned them before. For example, from the Detroit guys and Thomas Wehrmann and other Berlin people. And then later on, UK was also happening. There was the Brighton scene with No Future, with Christian Vogel, Dave Tarida, Neil Landstrom. They were from Brighton and from Scotland, but they were in this No Future posse, and they came over to play to Tresor. Then we all met, and then they said, okay, we have some music too. Then we said, yeah, let's do it. So you have to see some stuff that came because it was organic. It was not planned that you go, okay, now we check and find this person and sign him. It was sometimes also because they came over to play. And then we met, and then you were getting along well. There was also then the other part with Surgeon and Regis from UK. So we also got them on the label. I went to Leeds on tour, to UK on tour, also Leeds and Birmingham, to see how it goes there with Pete from Hot Wax and other people, and we just drove in a van and went to the clubs everywhere and checked them out to see how it goes there. The Drexciya project was brought to me by Mike Banks in Detroit. They were releasing on Underground Resistance, and they were ready to go the next level. And so he asked me if I would be. I was a general manager already that time. Again, that means general manager, but of course we were always a team. There was always people working together, and we decided together. But Drexciya, I did decide on my own, I have to admit. And then I met them in Detroit, and and we went fishing. It sounds a little bit crazy, but James Stinson took me to this island, Belle Isle, and wanted to go fishing with me. Beforehand, we had breakfast, and then we went there, and then we were sitting there and doing fishing. And I was thinking, what's going on here? And then we were talking about how it could work, how to do the campaign for the records and everything. And then it started. It was also more or less that, you need to see if it would work and which impression he would get. And his partner, Doppler Effect, was a little bit more behind the scenes. After James said, it's okay to go with them, I met him too. And then, it was pretty much, okay, let's do it. And so it happened. Thank you, Mike Banks. It's a super working relationship. And you have to see, we know each other from 89. When he came to play Atonal Festival, I mentioned before, with Final Cut. He was in this band Final Cut, and he was the mastermind, synthesizer and electronics. And then we met again at New Music Seminar. Then we did the records together. Then we just did a lot of projects together, and we're still working together. And it's great because we are friends. And also, if you have this long time relation, then you trust each other, and you support each other, and this is what we did, all the time. The story behind Pullproxy is that there was, after more than 20 years, my time at Tresor was over. There's times where you have to look at other directions and other ways in life. And so I left there. I'm still working with them also, in DJ bookings and everything, but my main part was over, and I had to get orientated in other ways. And then I started to work at Pullproxy agency and booking. And then my partner back in the days said that he would also new orientation in life and left. And since then, I'm running it. And it's an agency for promotion management and booking. And so it's some stuff that I also did beforehand in Tresor Records and Tresor surrounding. But now it's my company. It's independent from, it's just independent, and we can be free and choose who we work with. And and I mean, like I said, the passion of the music is the important thing. As long as this is there, there's always something you can work on and get going. It's of course different, but it has similarities. Yeah, I mean the way that if there is a movement growing, always attracts also companies that are sponsoring and supporting, and they want to have access to this group of people, big group of people with their products, for example. Yeah. And then at the same time also, bigger record companies come in, and an artist also, if they were underground, they want to become overground, and then they have maybe the how you say it, inside already, that they also can write more commercial music, and why not doing this? So all underground scenes always had a commercializing part at one point. That's a normal development. And the moment that happens, then you have the commercial side here, the overground side, which always means that you have new underground coming up, going against this with, now difficult to say, because the technical revolution we had, that was also, the big change for electronic music, and made it happen. The technical change now was done one time. Now we have adjustment with, for example, producing programs and everything. But the main thing is now that you do more crossover, for example. Or what I can see is that a lot of young people going back to industrial parts. They listen also to older bands or young or newer, harder bands, and use electronic music. And there's a big industrial scene, for example, as well, which is still underground. So I don't know what happens next. What you can see is that it goes back to, also we have there's 80s revival, then there in electronic music you have the 90s rave revival now. Probably the next will be the minimal coming back. I don't know. But then you have to see the young people, they haven't experienced that yet. For them, it's new. So there's always movement. And I think sometimes we older people, we forget that for them, it's new. They just start to go out, they just explore the music and the club music and what's going on. And they don't know about minimalism if they're now 18. What I hear, I was in Argentina and Chile a long time ago, but I learned also there that there is, of course, scene and artists were coming over, and now, it's happening in South America.
Yeah.
And so I guess there is a strong audience and very strong, also passionate people. I don't know how, I have to admit, I don't know so much about when exactly, for example, it started really to happen in Mexico City, for example. But of course it did, as we discussed before, because it was happening everywhere.
Exactly.
So I hope that also the connections between Europe and South America will, evolve and get stronger, and more people coming over to play here, and back and forth. and exchange also whatever is possible. Unfortunately, the lockdown, the pandemic situation makes it a little bit more difficult in terms of flight overs, and it's all more expensive now. So hopefully that gets to normal, don't know, at one point again sometime soon.